Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia Season 8 review, and today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, Episode 6, Wrench Open Izuku Midoriya, which continues the big battle between Deku and Shigaraki, where we left off with Deku severely on the back foot, having struggled with the effects of the backlash of Gear Shift, after it finally activated after numerous episodes talking about how this quirk being used is going to knock Deku out of commission just like that. I guess that's how time works in anime though. At the end of the last episode, Kudo, the second user, decided the only way for them to win is to force feed Shigaraki One for All's individual quirks, and by doing so, maybe they'll be able to break down his mental barriers, unleash his buried trauma, and give him a massive mental breakdown. It's certainly a flying by the seat of your pants Hail Mary type of plan, but I suppose that given the situation, it really is the last thing they're going to be able to do at all. Also, before we go any further, I do want to say that whilst I have read the manga, aside from quite literally the ending, everything else has fallen out of my mind, and so I am well and truly flying blind. That being said, some stuff might come back to me, and I might blurt out some spoilers, so be warned, that might be the case. Now let's get on with the episode, shall we? Okay, so we head into the cold open, and once again I have to say the music for this whole final season has been so good. The eerie, dark orchestral themes, sort of Phantom of the Opera vibes, I guess. It just really works and makes everything feel so much more intense and violent than it did before. To go along with that, we have our characters just going absolutely bananas. Despite Deku being wiped out from overuse of Gear Shift and collapsed on the ground only moments before this. With the aid of Black Whip, he's able to move around and concocts a plan to use this mostly untested ability to get close enough to force the transfer of Gear Shift into Shigaraki's body. Also, my god, once again, the Deku voice actor just going all out. You love to see it, or hear it, I guess. It's honestly so insane how good he is. It just elevates everything and ups the stakes so much. We have a brief flashback to All Might telling Deku about how the transferal element of the quirk works, setting up that you can force the transferal if you really want to. Planting the seeds in what? Season 1? I'm not sure that this would really have been the plan the whole way through, because I did read somewhere once that Horikoshi did have a few different ideas for the ending which would shift over time as things would develop, but still, it's very impressive. Whilst floating there, Deku realizes that since Shigaraki heals so quickly, the only way for him to pass along the blood and force the transferal of Gear Shift is by hitting him and doing it at the moment of impact. That being said, it was kind of funny for him to be talking about how Shigaraki's healing too quickly for Deku to be able to take the time to transfer the quirk, but the shot is then lingering on Shigaraki, who's missing an arm with muscles and tendons and whatnot just flopping in the wind. It really did go against the time pressure element they were trying to get across here. Yeah, he does rapidly regrow it in the very next shot, but at the same time, it was flopping there for quite a while. Whilst that was a little silly, I did like that they didn't really have to nerf Shigaraki to make this work. We've seen that he's still using Danger Sense and was able to figure out he was in trouble earlier, which allowed him to slice off his own arm. He knows that Deku's up to something and can to some degree read his thoughts, and so now he knows he has a plan. I don't think he's able to figure out what the plan actually is, but considering Deku's physical state, you'd expect he'd be dedicating the majority of his thought processes to simply staying alive, but he isn't, and so that leaves the tiny bit of doubt in the mind of the audience. Is this plan actually going to work, or is it going to be one of those moments where it's all lining up to be successful and the hero's going to seem triumphant, only for it to be revealed the villain's able to overcome the attack, making it seem all the more hopeless and forcing the hero to keep on fighting against the odds. The standoff at last comes to an end and the action begins. Deku charging Shigaraki head on, while Shigaraki makes his move to try to destroy Mount Fuji again by touching the ground. Deku uses smoke screen, although ends panicking, as like he said earlier on in last episode. At this point, Shigaraki can use Search to find Deku's quirk factor and thus attack him in the smoke. He's suddenly useless. Shigaraki touches the ground only to be pulled up by Deku, who reveals that he used Black Whip to create chains into the earth to rip certain sections up and prevent the spread of decay. I do have to say though, it seemed to me as if those green and red glowing Black Whip chains, which Deku supposedly set up after he got ping-ponged by Shigaraki earlier, were not attached to Deku before this. There are shots of him where you can clearly see his Black Whip tendrils, and I swear they're not there. Plus, Shigaraki would have been able to see these big chains leading to the ground from Deku's body in the sky, and so he would not have been surprised when he did this. Just felt like it had to be somewhat forced for the sake of the plot, you know? Felt like a bit of an ass pull. This next part though, really cool, way less of an ass pull. Shigaraki uses Search and sees a quirk factor coming right at him, and so he uses Decay, only to find that instead of Deku, it was just his cape. There was blood smeared on the cape, and this is what attracted his attention to begin with, because the quirk factor's in the blood, seeing as the quirk can be passed on through DNA. But the part I thought was very clever was that it actually wasn't Deku's DNA at all, it's Kudo's. Because Deku's only trying to pass on that one quirk, Kudo split off from Deku, and now he's in the blood being passed along. This distraction and the confusion allows Deku time to properly get into position for Shigaraki to charge him, and for Deku to be able to punch him so hard as to open a wound in him, and thus give Kudo a chance to run in, not get assimilated, and start to cause havoc inside Shigaraki's mind in a manner similar to Star and Stripe, I suppose. Also, I have to say, even here, in this really epic and serious finale, I did like that they included a small moment of levity with the little cartoon that accompanies Deku's explanation of how he uses the fact that Shigaraki can see him in the smoke against him. Just these goofy little animations. I don't know, I think it was a great palate cleanser because this season's so far been wall-to-wall combat, death, and violence. There's a lot of heavy themes, and so whilst it isn't 100% needed, it is nice to somewhat break up this type of thing if they can. I also like that they had this tiny little mini arc across the episode, and the last that involved En doubting himself and the worth of his quirk. He realized that with Search, Shigaraki could easily overcome the use of smokescreen, and so his contributions to Deku's power were essentially nullified. He no longer had the confidence to keep Deku in the fight, and suggested a tactical retreat might be in order. When Kudo tells them what the new plan's going to be, En is the biggest doubter, and then he volunteers himself to be the first one through the breach because he considers himself to be useless, and so Deku's not going to be missing out by passing on his quirk. However, then Kudo says that the reason Deku has such power and is able to make One for All shine is the love and admiration he has for all quirks, no matter their usage, not just for the most powerful, heavy-hitting ones. This in turn echoes in En's head again when Deku uses smokescreen to distract Shigaraki and force him to use his Search quirk because he can no longer see his physical body. This reliance on Search is then able to be exploited for their own ends. Thus, En starts crying and is all inspired by this kid who shows him that he still believes in En and smokescreen even when En's faith and belief in himself has wavered. I don't know, I just found it really unexpectedly moving and a great character moment for somebody who's barely been in the show. The music and visuals go wild again as Deku powers up his transfer punch and Kudo makes it in. Goodbye to the second user, it seems. I think that we might see him again in some internal monologue sequence for Shigaraki, but it seems his time as a main character of this season is over. It's a shame because he was a really cool character, but I guess it is what it is, you gotta keep moving forward. We get to the title screen, and when we return, it's to the immediate confirmation that this plan is working. We already knew that Shigaraki was a bit scared about what Deku had up his sleeve, and the creepy finger growths made their return, but now we see that his memories are playing out both before him and Deku, starting with Darby and Toga's first meeting with the man-child version of Shigaraki, before we see Deku and Shigaraki's memories begin to merge completely. After all, we know that when you pass on One for All, you become linked to it. It's why when he passed out, All Might could see into the vestige world and become one with his vestige, and why when he was on the verge of death and likely had come to terms with that fact, he started becoming more solid in the vestige realm instead of the golden ghost. However, when he was saved by Bakugo, the ghost came back in full force. So that means if there's a full transfer, part of Deku would now live in Shigaraki, a ghostly version. Since there's been a partial transfer instead though, it seems as if their minds are beginning to meld, hence why Spinner's suddenly facing off with Todoroki at the sports festival. The vestiges realize their plan is working, and so En encourages Deku to keep on fighting so they can be transferred over to help Kudo with what he's doing. This whole section where Deku's charging Shigaraki in the Dream Vortex, very cool. Once again, an audio and visual masterclass right here. I liked how the music became more low-key and emotional as well. A whole different vibe from what we saw when he was transferring Kudo. I have to say, I did get a case of the feels when they had some of the flashbacks echoing from season 1 on screen. All of that feels so long ago now, doesn't it? Then the hype begins to build once again. Yoichi reflects on how his brother was never able to fully grasp why he could never take One for All for himself. He could never understand that no matter how powerful he became, he simply didn't have the will to overcome their joint spirit. They all start charging and it's so epic and you think they're gonna do it. The music's building, you have this awesome visual of all of them running, becoming different colors, then they circle Deku's hand. Deku's floating through all the different memories and screams out Shigaraki's name as the music continues to build, and he breaks through the defenses and the attack gets rejected because of Shigaraki's powerful spirit. However, what I did like was that En was able to slip through, and I think that's because he was able to regain his own strength and his confidence in himself because he witnessed Deku's faith in his smokescreen quirk to complete the plan. It's just like how Kudo was able to break through on his own because he believed in the plan too, and had come to believe in Deku as well despite being a massive doubter. So it's a bit of a stalemate here. They've had some success, but at the same time, there's a long way to go. Luckily, Deku should be suffering far less now because Rico is gone due to him passing on Gear Shift. Obviously, this was only a partial transfer to extend out the episode and whatnot, but I do think it was important to show that Shigaraki is still very strong, and the Deku and the Vestiges have to struggle hard to defeat him. We see a brief glimpse of Shigaraki's childhood where he's holding hands with All for One, and Deku starts to get a glimpse of the true trauma in his past, so he decides that he's just going to keep on punching till he breaks through, again and again and again. Surprisingly, we actually take a little bit of a side tangent from here, first witnessing some of the evacuation efforts of the coffin in the sky, which in turn leads to the world tuning into Deku's battle with Shigaraki. Unsurprisingly, they're very freaked out by the state of Shigaraki, but it seems as if all the hopeful enthusiasm built from Bakugo defeating All for One has evaporated instantly. The crowd's freaked out and Eri tries to run away so she can find Deku and help him using her quirk like she did in the battle with Overhaul. We got a funny little flashback to Aizawa telling Eri that he'd been hit by a dump truck and that was why he was so badly injured, when in actuality, it was from the big battle with Shigaraki at the hospital and then the city. Now Deku's facing that exact same danger. We also see Koda trying to comfort her, only for him to burst into tears as well. Me too, kid. Me too. Also, as this is all going, you get glimpses of pretty amazing action sequences. I really liked that they showed this more human side of things here, but at the same time, part of me was thinking that we were missing out on some pretty good action. We then get a very sad and yet very relatable moment where Kaminari, despite knowing how strong Deku is, can't feel the same sense of comfort that he'd feel whenever All Might was fighting. One, probably because he knows Deku personally and has seen his struggles and defeats, whereas All Might even now is this great mythical figure, but also to a lesser extent, really just Deku isn't on that level. Yes, he's obviously strong, but All Might was kicking ass and inspiring people for decades. It takes time to get to the level that no matter what you do, people are expect you're gonna win. Deku's barely a year into his career. Hell, he's not even in his career, he's still a student. Thus, I thought this felt very realistic overall. We cut over the Mountain Villa battle site where the injured, including Uraraka, are being evacuated, and Hawks is reflecting on the words that she spoke to get the crowd to accept Deku way back at the start of last season, I think it was. We see Lady Nagant reflecting on how it doesn't make sense for her to have helped Deku, but she did. He wrenched open her heart and inspired her. That he has this desperation about him in battle that makes you want to support him and see him win. I loved that it cut back to the crowd watching the battle in this moment to show that there is truth in the words. I think it's just as I said. They don't have faith in Deku like they did for All Might. It would be impossible for Deku to be on that level so soon, but that doesn't mean they don't support him. That one muttering voice, "You can do it." I don't know, it just got me feeling things. I found it very emotional. It was a great cutaway to extend out the fight and add a bit more emotion to things. Because after all, we know that on some level, Deku's plan has to work. It has to for the story to continue onwards. Thus, a deep dive into the fears and hopes of those that know Deku or who are watching him on TV just makes a lot of sense. Then it's finally back to the battle for some epic action where Deku's going toe-to-toe with the creepy finger tendrils. Toe-to-toe? Finger-to-finger maybe? I don't know. Kudo and En have done their work, and now Shigaraki's starting to struggle. He's not as strong, he's not as fast. It's allowing Deku to keep on surviving, whilst at the same time, he's getting more emotional because his memories are flooding back. He sees his angry father's face in Deku, and he yells at him in fear and rage to stay away. Deku pretty quickly lands another blow, prompting one of the all-time best reaction shots from Shigaraki. I don't know what it was about this, it just made me laugh so much. It completely took me out of the moment, but that's okay. The accompanying shot of Deku goes really hard though. The vestiges all charge once more, and this time it's only Nana who ends up getting rejected. God, that would suck, wouldn't it? Feeling that you're the weakest of all the users of the quirk and the one that's letting the team down. Much like En, Nana's dealing with a whole lot of feelings of inadequacy and shame, mostly to do with the fact that she left her son behind to protect him, and that her grandson is now a deranged killer that they're trying to defeat. I actually find her fate so depressing. All For One didn't even really hate her. He liked to toy with most of the users for One For All, except for Kudo. He clearly hated that guy, and hence he wiped out any chance of him ever passing on his DNA. Anyway, back to Nana. He killed her, and after her death, he seemingly went out of his way to ruin her family legacy, just to troll All Might. I don't even think it was about her anymore. I gotta say, I miss All For One. He was such a great villain. Deku punches so hard he ends up phasing into Shigaraki's repressed memories alongside Nana, and together they make their way towards the center, towards the Shimura house where it all went down. There are a few attempts by Shigaraki's mind to repel Deku, like trying to run him over with a truck or sending his interpretation of Deku to talk to him, and then his version of Stain to attack him, but they don't really have much impact. I'm thinking that's probably the effect of all the vestiges holding him back. After all, Kudo and En alone were able to do significant damage and give Deku a chance when prior to that, at the start of their fight, Deku couldn't even land a proper blow and was getting smacked around. The rest of them charging in's probably sent him into a tailspin and given Deku this chance to go inside and do some more damage before we get the big reveal of Shigaraki's pain. We then get to see the full truth. The initial aspiration to be just like his grandma and be a hero with his sister, which turns into the pain of being abused by his dad. Oh, the shock on Nana's face when she sees her son full on smack little Shigaraki in the face was so heartbreaking. Also, are we gonna see Shigaraki killing his family, but from her POV now? Oh, that's gonna be intense. My god, this is one way to up the tension. It feels like the battle's gonna enter a little lull period here and we get some heavy plot next episode. Almost all of it seems to be taking place in this dreamscape, but we did have a cutaway to the Aizawa and Present Mike plot with Kurogiri, and since the episode title seemingly refers to Aizawa, I think that maybe they run through a little bit of Shigaraki's story in quick flashes, but most of the episode's gonna cut away to that plot. Otherwise, I have no idea why they title it that way. Anyway though, with all that being said, that's the end of the episode, and these have all been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.